If you've spent any time in crypto, you've probably heard the same advice. Buy a hardware wallet. Keep your private keys offline. And if you ask which one to buy, one name comes up more than any other. Ledger. More than 7 million devices have been sold worldwide, helping secure billions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency. And despite years of attacks, no one has ever remotely cracked the hardware itself. So why have Ledger users lost tens of millions of dollars? The answer isn't hidden inside the device. It's hidden everywhere around it. Welcome to Chain CSI. Over the past 6 years, a series of data breaches, insider attacks, supply chain compromises, and phishing campaigns turned Ledger customers into some of the most heavily targeted people in crypto. Most people know the headlines. Very few know what happened next. I spent weeks tracing wallets connected to phishing campaigns, fake Ledger software, and social engineering attacks linked to these incidents. Today, we're going to follow that story from the beginning, and then follow the money. To ship a Ledger device, the company, or one of its partners, needs your personal information: your name, your email address, your phone number, your shipping address, your order history. None of that information lives inside the hardware wallet. It lives in ordinary databases connected to the internet. And unlike the hardware wallet itself, those databases only need to be breached once. What happened over the next 6 years wasn't one isolated incident. It was a chain reaction. Every breach gave attackers more information. Every phishing campaign became more convincing. Every successful scam created more victims, and each incident built on the one before it. It all started in the summer of 2020, with a single exposed API key. July 2020. The first major crack in Ledger security didn't come from breaking its hardware. It came from breaking into the systems surrounding it. A security researcher contacted Ledger through its bug bounty program after discovering that an exposed third-party API key could be used to access the company's marketing and e-commerce infrastructure. Ledger moved quickly to revoke the key and secure the system. But by then, the attackers had already copied customer data. At first, the breach appeared relatively limited. Ledger disclosed that more than 1 million email addresses had been exposed, along with the personal information of roughly 9,500 customers, including names, phone numbers, home addresses, and order details. It was serious. But few people realized what those records actually represented. They weren't just customer profiles. They were a verified list of cryptocurrency holders. For criminals, that list was incredibly valuable. Instead of sending millions of random phishing emails hoping someone owned crypto, they could now target people they knew had purchased a hardware wallet. 5 months later, the situation became much worse. In December 2020, the stolen database appeared online, uploaded to a forum. Anyone could download it. And when researchers examined the leak, they discovered the scale had been massively underestimated. Not 9,500 detailed customer records, but more than 272,000 names, home addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, purchase histories, everything attackers needed to identify and target Ledger owners. The phishing campaign started almost immediately. Fake Ledger emails, fake firmware updates, fake Ledger live downloads, SMS messages warning customers that their wallets were at risk. Every message had one goal: convince victims to reveal their 24-word recovery phrase. But the attacks didn't stop online. Victims began receiving extortion emails that referenced their real names and home addresses, demanding Bitcoin payments and threatening physical violence. For many Ledger customers, this was the first time they realized that buying a hardware wallet had exposed more than just an email address. It had exposed their identity. Then the scams became even more sophisticated. Some customers received what appeared to be brand new Ledger devices in the mail. The packaging looked genuine. The letter appeared to be signed by Ledger's CEO. It claimed the customer's existing device should be replaced because of a recent security issue. But inside was a modified device designed to steal the victim's recovery phrase. The attack had evolved from phishing emails to physical mail. September 2020. Before Ledger customers had even recovered from the first breach, someone else had already copied their data. If the first breach was the result of an exposed API key, the second didn't require hackers to break in at all. They already had someone on the inside. Ledger used Shopify to process orders through its online store. Like thousands of other businesses, customer information passed through Shopify's systems so purchases could be completed and shipped. But in September 2020, two rogue employees working for a third-party customer support contractor abused their access and began stealing customer records from merchants using Shopify, including Ledger. This wasn't an external hack. It was an insider threat. People who already had legitimate access to sensitive customer information chose to abuse it. What's remarkable is that Ledger didn't know, not in September, not in October, and not in November. It wasn't until December, after the first database had already been leaked publicly, that Shopify informed Ledger their customers had also been affected. Roughly 20,000 additional Ledger customers had their information exposed through Shopify that hadn't appeared in the first breach. Unlike most crypto-related data breaches, this case eventually led to arrests. Law enforcement traced the operation to Tassilo Heinrich, who had paid for unauthorized access to Shopify's internal systems in order to steal customer data from multiple merchants. One of the people involved was later convicted in the United States and was sentenced to time served and $51,000 in restitution. But by then, the damage had already been done. By the end of 2020, attackers had learned something incredibly valuable. They didn't need to attack Ledger's hardware. They already knew who owned it. Every new phishing email became more convincing. Every fake support message became more believable. Every leaked record increased the chances that someone, somewhere, would eventually hand over their recovery phrase. And years later, that's exactly what happened. But before we follow those victims, Ledger faced a completely different kind of attack. This time, the target wasn't customer data. It was the software trusted by thousands of crypto applications. For nearly 3 years after the 2020 breaches, Ledger customers remained prime targets for phishing and social engineering. Then, in December 2023, the threat changed completely. Ledger maintains a software library called ConnectKit. It's an open-source toolkit that allows websites and decentralized applications to connect with Ledger hardware wallets. If you've ever clicked Connect Ledger on a DeFi application, there's a good chance ConnectKit was working behind the scenes. On the morning of December 14th, attackers compromised the account of a former Ledger employee who still had access to publish updates to the library. Using that access, they pushed a malicious version of ConnectKit to developers around the world. Within minutes, websites that relied on the compromised package began serving malicious code to their users. Security researchers later linked the malicious code to infrastructure associated with Angel Drainer, one of the most active crypto phishing operations at the time. As reports spread across the crypto community, developers rushed to disable wallet connections. Projects warned users not to interact with their websites. Ledger revoked the compromised package and released a clean version within a matter of hours. From the first malicious update to its removal, the attack lasted roughly 5 hours. Estimated stolen $610,000, $25,000 frozen by Tether. Approximately $106,000 remains dormant. The rest moved through instant exchanges and laundering services. Compared to the phishing campaigns that followed the 2020 breaches, the financial losses were relatively small, but the implications were enormous. Then, in 2026, most people assumed the worst was over. But that assumption didn't last long. In January 2026, Ledger customers began receiving breach notifications from a company many of them had never heard of. Global E. Global E is an international e-commerce infrastructure provider that handles payments, taxes, and logistics for online stores. According to public disclosures and technical analysis, a misconfigured API key in a cloud system allowed unauthorized access to customer data. Names, email addresses, phone numbers, shipping addresses, and order information. Once again, the pattern was familiar, not Ledger's hardware, not Ledger's encryption, but a third-party system sitting quietly in the background of the purchase process. And once again, Ledger customers were affected. Within hours of the disclosure, phishing campaigns began circulating. Emails referencing recent updates, fake support messages, attempts to trick users into revealing sensitive wallet information. And by this point, the question is no longer, what happened in each breach? The question becomes, what happened to the people whose data was exposed? That question is what led me deeper into this investigation. I began tracing known phishing campaigns tied to these breaches. Then I expanded into wallet clusters that had never been publicly linked to Ledger incidents. Then I started finding patterns, repeated addresses, shared laundering routes. victims who had no idea their losses were connected to data breaches years earlier, and what I found suggests something far larger than what has ever been officially documented. Because the story doesn't end with leaked data, because one question was never fully answered. What did all of this actually cost? Not in theory, not in risk, but in real, stolen cryptocurrency. To answer that, I started tracing what came after the breaches. I began with known phishing campaigns tied to the 2020 data leak, fake ledger support emails, seed phrase phishing websites, physical mail scams. Then I followed the transactions, where the funds went, how they were moved, how they were laundered. One of the first clusters I verified contained over 40 victims. Total losses, $1 million plus. Then another cluster. This one was larger. Victims spread across multiple countries, different phishing entry points, but the same downstream wallet infrastructure. Total losses, $13.5 million across over 50 victims. Then another, and another. Some campaigns were clearly tied to ledger-related phishing infrastructure. Others showed patterns consistent with the same operators, but without enough on-chain certainty to include fully in the dataset. So I only included what I could verify directly, and even with that limitation, the numbers kept growing. The same data exposed in 2020 was still being used years later to target victims with near-perfect precision. Across all the clusters I could independently verify. The phishing and social engineering losses I was able to document across email campaigns, physical letters, and impersonation operations add up to over $25.9 million in traceable victim losses. And that does not include every case, only the ones I could directly trace on-chain. But the investigation didn't stop there. Because while phishing campaigns explained part of the losses, something else was emerging in parallel. Fake applications. Software designed specifically to drain wallets under the appearance of legitimacy, and that leads to something even bigger. In early 2026, a malicious application posing as an official ledger-related tool made its way onto the Apple App Store. At first glance, it appeared legitimate, but its purpose was simple: to drain wallets under the appearance of normal user interaction. Between April 7th and 13th, the application contributed to more than $9.5 million in losses across over 50 victims. One publicly identified victim, an American musician G. Love, alone lost $431,000 in Bitcoin, with funds later traced through KuCoin exchange. Between the fake apps and the phishing campaigns, I'm looking at over $44 million in documented victim losses that I was able to verify independently. Unlike phishing emails, this attack didn't rely on convincing someone to reveal their recovery phrase. It relied on trust in distribution platforms, the App Store, the ecosystem. And just like the phishing campaigns, the funds didn't disappear, laundered via KuCoin exchange. 4 major incidents, different attack vectors, different years, different systems, but one consistent target: ledger customers. And if you step back far enough, the story stops being about individual breaches. It becomes something larger. Some victims lost a few $100s. Others lost life-changing amounts. There are also cases that cannot be cleanly attributed. Victims who never reported losses. Campaigns that blurred into other unrelated scams. So the real impact sits somewhere between what is provable and what is visible only in fragments. One thing, however, remains clear. The weakness was everything ledger. The companies handling customer data, the vendors processing orders, the employees with access, and the attackers who understood that leaked identity data could be turned into financial targeting at scale. Because once someone knows your name, your address, and that you own crypto, they don't need to hack anything. They just need you to believe them. 10 days after the most recent breach disclosure in 2026, a separate incident surfaced involving a hardware wallet user losing over $282 million in a sophisticated social engineering attack. There is no public evidence linking that case to Ledger. When a $282 million social engineering attack hits a hardware wallet user 10 days after Ledger's 4th data breach, the connection isn't something you can just ignore. That brings the total picture across the fake apps, the phishing campaigns, the ConnectKit drain, and the January 2026 case to over $326 million in losses connected, directly or circumstantially, to operations that fed on Ledger's customer data. For Ledger users, and crypto users in general, the lesson is not that hardware wallets failed. It's that identity exposure creates long-term risk. A breach is not a single event. It is the beginning of a supply chain for future attacks. Ledger's hardware remains one of the safest ways to store crypto. But the story of these incidents is not about the device. It is about everything surrounding it. This is Chain CSI, investigating the crimes hidden on-chain. If you enjoyed this investigation, subscribe and join us for the next case, because the next clue is already on the blockchain.